You've seen the body cam footage. A driver is sitting in his car, hands on the wheel, doing everything right. The officer leans in, smiles, and says, "You don't have anything illegal in here, do you? You mind if I just take a quick peek to be safe?" The driver thinks to himself, if I say no, I look guilty. If I say yes, I look like an honest, cooperative citizen. So he says, "Sure, go ahead." 45 minutes later, his seats are ripped out. His personal belongings are scattered across the pavement, and he's sitting on the curb in handcuffs. And here is the part that should terrify you, the part law enforcement will never voluntarily tell you. The Supreme Court has ruled that the moment you consent to a search, you have just waived nearly every single one of your Fourth Amendment protections. They no longer need a warrant. They no longer need probable cause. They don't even need a real reason, because you handed them the keys to your entire life with one casual word. Here's what makes that even scarier. Blue lights in your rearview mirror, heart pounding, adrenaline flooding your system, and the officer walking toward your window is not just a person. He is a trained professional, specifically, deliberately, methodically trained to ask questions in a way that gets you to hand over your rights without ever realizing you did it. And the Supreme Court has ruled this is not a conspiracy theory, this is black-letter law, that police officers are legally permitted to lie to you during questioning. They can misrepresent what the law requires. They can tell you something is mandatory when it absolutely is not. They can manufacture the feeling that you have no choice, when in reality you have every choice. In this video, I am going to give you the exact words, word for word, that you need to say when a cop deploys these tricks on you during a traffic stop. Not vague advice, not general know your rights content that evaporates the moment blue lights appear in your mirror, the actual sentences that shut down each trap legally, calmly, and completely. Stay with me to the end, because I am handing you a complete master script you can screenshot right now and keep on your phone. So the next time you are on the side of that road, you are never caught off guard again. But first, you need to understand the traps themselves. Because the scariest part is not just that these tricks exist, it is how brilliantly they are engineered. You are pulled over. Maybe it is a tail light. Maybe you were 5 miles per hour over the limit. The officer approaches your window and does not ask for your license first. Instead, he smiles and says, "So where are you headed today? Where are you coming from?" It sounds like small talk. It sounds like he is just being friendly. It is not. Under the law, this is called gathering intelligence. The officer is specifically looking for 3 things before he even runs your plates. He is looking for inconsistency. If you say you are coming from work but you are wearing a swimsuit, that inconsistency becomes a thread he pulls. He is watching for nervousness, the shakiness in your voice, the way your eyes move, your carotid artery. All of it is being catalogued while you answer what feels like a casual question, and he is listening for jurisdictional hooks. If you mention you are coming from a city known as a drug corridor, or a state where something is legal that is not legal, where you are standing right now, you have just handed him building blocks for reasonable suspicion. And here is why that matters so much. Once he has reasonable suspicion, he can extend the stop. Once he extends the stop, he can call for backup. Once there is backup, things get exponentially more complicated. All of it started because you answered what sounded like small talk. Here is something most people never realize. You are never legally required to explain yourself to a police officer during a traffic stop. You are required to provide your license, your registration, and your proof of insurance. That is it. That is the complete list. Everything else, every single question beyond handing over those documents, is voluntary. And you have an absolute Fifth Amendment right to decline every single one. So here's exactly what you say when the officer opens with, "Where are you coming from?" or "Where are you headed?" "Officer, I prefer not to discuss my personal travels. I'm happy to provide my license and insurance as required by law." If he pushes back and says something like, "Why so defensive? You got something to hide?" And he might, because that is another layer of the same trap. You say, "I'm not being defensive, officer. I'm simply exercising my right to remain silent regarding my personal business. Am I free to leave or am I being detained?" That last question, "Am I free to leave or am I being detained?" is one of the most powerful phrases you can speak during a traffic stop. It forces the officer to make a legal decision on camera. If he says you are free to leave, the conversation is over and you go. If he says you are being detained, he now has to justify that on his body cam in a way that will hold up in front of a judge. Either outcome is far better than answering the original question. Now, if that trap feels dangerous, the next one is even more insidious because it does not go after what you say. It goes after your silence. Picture this. You have handed over your documents. You have been polite. You have said nothing incriminating, and then the officer just stands there, staring at you, not speaking, holding your license, looking at you like he is waiting for something to happen. Most people physically cannot handle that silence. It is primal psychological pressure. Every instinct you have is screaming at you to fill the gap, to explain yourself, to justify where you were going or who you were with, to offer up some piece of information just to break the unbearable tension. And the moment you do, the moment you fill that silence with anything at all, the officer now has more to work with than he had 30 seconds ago. I have watched this happen in case after case. A driver gets pulled over for a minor equipment violation. The officer says nothing after taking the license. 30 seconds pass. The driver, completely innocent, blurts out, "I know my rear light has been out. I have just been so busy. I am heading back from a friend's place. We were just hanging out." Now the officer is asking about the friend. Now he wants to know what kind of hanging out. Now he is looking for reasons that did not exist 60 seconds ago. None of it had to happen. The driver did all of it to himself. Here's the legal truth. Silence cannot be used as evidence against you in a traffic stop. The Fifth Amendment protects your right not to speak. A trained officer using silence as a pressure tactic is not probable cause for anything. It is a psychological trick and nothing more. So here is exactly what you say when the silence stretches past comfort. "Officer, I'm going to remain silent and wait for you to complete the stop. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm exercising my constitutional rights." Say it once, then actually stay quiet. Do not apologize for it. Do not explain it further. Do not soften it with anything that follows, because the moment you start elaborating, you have already broken the silence you just declared you were keeping. That phrase closes the loop. There is no longer an open question hanging in the air. You have given a complete and final answer, and there is nothing left for the silence to pressure out of you. But here is where it escalates. The next trap is not about silence. It is the exact opposite. It is about flooding you with so many questions so fast that you cannot track what you are agreeing to. And this one is specifically designed to work on people who believe they are too smart to fall for tricks. Where are you coming from? Where are you headed? Who were you with? How long were you there? Do you have anything in the car I should know about? 5 questions, back to back. No pause between them. This is not a coincidence. Officers who use this technique are trained to deliver multiple questions before you have had a chance to process and respond to the first one. Because here is what happens inside your brain when 5 questions hit you at once. Your mind races to keep up. You start answering in sequence. You are half answering question 2 while still formulating your answer to question 1. The part of your brain that filters what you say before you say it gets completely overwhelmed, and things come out unfiltered, details you had not planned to share, timestamps that do not quite line up, inconsistencies between answers that are not lies, they are just memory under pressure, but they look like lies on a police report. And that final question, do you have anything in the car I should know about? Is its own trap wrapped inside the bigger trap? If you say no and they search and find something, you have now potentially made a false statement to an officer. If you hesitate or stumble over the answer, that pause becomes the foundation for suspicion. So here is exactly how you handle the rapid-fire sequence. You do not try to answer the questions in order. You do not try to answer them at all. The moment the officer fires the first question in what feels like a volley, you say this: "Officer, I mean no disrespect, but I've been advised by my attorney not to answer questions during traffic stops. I'm happy to provide my license, registration, and insurance. Beyond that, I'm invoking my right to remain silent." Say it once. Clearly, calmly. Hand over your documents and stop talking. What follows will be the guilt trip, and you need to be ready for it. I'm just trying to help you out here. Or maybe it sounds like this. Look, I'm giving you a chance right now. Most officers wouldn't even do this. Just tell me what's going on, and we can get this sorted out. Or the more threatening version. We can either do this the easy way where you just talk to me, or I can call my supervisor, and this gets a lot more complicated. Your choice. This is what I call the good person guilt trip, and it is devastatingly effective because it weaponizes your own decency against you. Most people, good, law-abiding, decent people, have a deeply wired instinct to cooperate with authority figures, especially ones who are being warm and seemingly reasonable. When a cop frames the conversation as him doing you a personal favor, refusing to cooperate feels ungrateful. Rude even, like you are the one creating the problem when all he is trying to do is help. That feeling is manufactured. Deliberately. I have read police training manuals that explicitly describe building rapport and appearing helpful as documented techniques for lowering a subject's guard and encouraging disclosure. This is not speculation. This is trained, practiced, and intentional. The threat version works on the other end of the same emotional lever. Now it is not gratitude being used against you. It is fear. You cooperate because you are afraid that refusing will make everything worse. Here is the truth the officer is not telling you. Invoking your constitutional rights cannot legally be used as justification for extending the stop, increasing suspicion, or escalating the encounter. The moment you invoke your right to remain silent, a legal clock on that stop begins ticking. And if the officer tries to extend it based solely on the fact that you would not answer questions, he may be violating your Fourth Amendment rights. So, when you hear the guilt trip, here is exactly what you say. Officer, I genuinely appreciate that. I'm not trying to cause any problems and I respect what you do, but on the advice of my attorney, I don't answer questions during traffic stops. I've provided my documents. Am I free to go? That response acknowledges the officer's framing without accepting it. You are not arguing. You are not hostile. You are being completely respectful while standing absolutely firm. And then the tricks get more aggressive. You're required by law to answer my questions. Or, not telling me where you're coming from is obstruction. Or, if you don't answer, I have the right to detain you. Let me be completely direct. These statements are false. And when an officer says them, he knows they are false. You are not legally required to answer investigative questions during a traffic stop. The Supreme Court has ruled on this clearly and repeatedly. Declining to answer questions when you are not under arrest is not obstruction of justice. Your refusal to speak cannot by itself constitute grounds for detention beyond the scope of the original stop. But here is the problem. When you are standing on the side of a road at night, adrenaline running, with a uniformed officer looking you in the eye and stating with complete authority that the law requires you to do something, you believe him. Of course you do. He has the badge, the training, and the tone. Why would he lie? Because he legally can, and because it works nearly every time. What makes this trap so devastating is that there is no time to fact-check. You cannot pull out your phone and search case law while an officer is standing 3 feet from you demanding an answer. You have to already know what is true before you ever get to that roadside. So here is exactly what you say when an officer makes a false legal claim to pressure you. Officer, with respect, I don't believe I'm legally required to answer those questions, and I'm going to continue to exercise my right to remain silent. If you believe you have legal grounds to detain me, I'd ask that you explain the specific law requiring me to answer. Otherwise, am I free to go? You are not calling him a liar. You are not being aggressive. You are doing something far more powerful. You are turning the legal burden back onto him. If there is actually a law requiring you to answer, make him cite it specifically, because there is not one, and he knows it. And now you have made clear that you know it too. The officer now faces a choice. Either he fabricates a specific legal citation on the spot, which he will not do, or he implicitly acknowledges that you have the right to stay silent. Either way, you win. Now let's talk about consent to search, because this is where innocent people lose everything. An officer will look at you and say, "You don't mind if I take a look in the trunk, do you?" Think carefully about the logic here. If you say yes, you might mean yes. I do mind. But the officer writes in his report that the subject said yes when asked to consent to a search. If you say no, you might mean no, you cannot search. But the officer claims, you meant no, I do not mind at all. It is a heads-I-win, tails-you-lose linguistic trap. It is designed specifically for the moment when your adrenaline is highest and your brain is working hardest to process social pressure. Never answer a question about your rights with a single word. Yes and no are too easy to reframe in a report. You must use a complete sentence that leaves absolutely zero room for creative interpretation. Officer, I do not consent to any searches of my person, my property, or my vehicle. Say it clearly. Say it in the direction of the body cam. If he asks again, and he almost always does, often rephrased as, "What are you worried about if you have nothing to hide?" You repeat the exact same sentence word for word. In court, if a body camera shows you saying, "I do not consent" clearly and repeatedly, and a search happened anyway, that search has a strong chance of being thrown out. And if the search is thrown out, every piece of evidence found during it, regardless of what it was, becomes what the law calls fruit of the poisonous tree. It all disappears. But what about when the soft tactics stop working and the officer switches to hard pressure? Look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. I can call a judge right now, get a warrant, and we will be here for 3 hours. Or you can just open the trunk, I will see that you are a good person, and you will be home in 5 minutes. This is called the warrant bluff. Most people break right here. They value the next 3 hours of their time more than their privacy, and they open the trunk. Here is what the officer is not telling you. Obtaining a warrant is a significant logistical burden. The officer has to contact a prosecutor, draft an affidavit, locate a judge willing to sign it, and swear under oath that he has actual probable cause. Most roadside hunches do not come close to meeting that legal standard. When an officer threatens a warrant, he is usually not going to get one. He is hoping you will trade your constitutional rights for the illusion of convenience. Do not. Officer, I understand your position. However, I do not consent to a search. If you feel you have the legal grounds to obtain a warrant, I am prepared to wait for the court's decision. That sentence signals that you know exactly how the system works. 90% of the time, the officer will eventually issue the citation and let you go, because the paperwork is not worth it when the subject knows the law. If the officer calls for a K-9 unit, understand your rights precisely. Thanks to Rodriguez v. United States, an officer cannot unreasonably prolong a traffic stop just to wait for a drug dog. If the original purpose of the stop has been completed, he cannot legally hold you there without independent, reasonable suspicion. So once the officer finishes writing your ticket and hands it back, you ask, "Officer, is the business of this traffic stop concluded?" If he says yes, you immediately follow with, "Am I free to leave?" If he says no, you ask, "What is the specific legal reason you are detaining me further, since the traffic matter is finished?" That creates a legal clock on camera. If that dog arrives after the window of the original stop is closed, any alert it gives may be ruled unconstitutional. You are building your courtroom defense while standing on the side of the road. Now here's the most important moment of the entire stop, and most people never see it coming. The officer hands you back your license. He gives you your warning or your ticket. He says, "Have a safe drive." Your body physically relaxes, the adrenaline begins to drain, you reach for your seatbelt, and then he stops, takes 2 steps toward his cruiser, turns around, leans back into your window and says, "Oh hey, before you go, totally off the record, you don't have anything in there that shouldn't be there, do you? You mind if I just take a real quick look to clear everything up?" Nothing said to a police officer is ever off the record, not one word. This moment is called the second stage stop, and it is the most legally dangerous point of the entire interaction. Here is why. The officer is trying to convert a detention, a stop where you had no choice but to stay, into what the courts call a consensual encounter. If you stay and keep talking, courts will rule that you were there of your own free will. You were not being stopped anymore. You were just voluntarily chatting with someone who happened to have a badge. And everything said or discovered in a consensual encounter carries far less constitutional protection. The officer has been building to this moment the entire time. The whole stop, the patience, was in service of catching you in this single moment of relief. Here is exactly what you say when the friendly finish happens. "Thank you, officer. I appreciate it. I'm going to head out now, and I'm going to continue to exercise my right not to answer further questions. Have a good night." Then you get in your car. You close the door, and you drive away. No extended goodbye, no lingering small talk, no answering the one quick thing. You responded to the dismissal, and you left. Clean, final, done. Now here is something I need to be completely clear about, because this is the part where people sometimes turn a bad situation into a catastrophic one. If, despite everything you have said and done, the officer decides to search your vehicle anyway, do not physically resist. Do not grab his arm. Do not block him. Do not raise your voice or make any sudden movements. I know that feels profoundly unfair, and it may well be illegal on his part. But here is the reality you must accept in that moment. You do not win the constitutional argument on the side of the road. You win it in a courtroom. If you physically resist, you hand the officer a resisting arrest charge that will follow you even if the underlying search was completely unconstitutional. So here is what you do instead. You stay calm, and you say this, clearly and firmly, so that every camera and every bystander captures it. "Officer, I am not physically resisting, but I want the camera to see that I have explicitly denied consent for this search. You are proceeding over my legal objection, and I am preserving my right to challenge this in court." Say it once, say it firmly, then stop. That single statement is the foundation of every suppression motion, every civil rights claim, and every piece of legal accountability that can come later. Those words, spoken calmly in that moment, can eventually get the evidence thrown out entirely, and sometimes they can do far more than that. Here is the complete master script. Screenshot this, save it somewhere you can access it from your lock screen. Read it enough times that it becomes instinct. When they ask where you are coming from or where you are headed, you say, "Officer, I prefer not to discuss my personal travels. I'm happy to provide my license and insurance as required by law. Am I free to leave, or am I being detained?" When they use silence to pressure you, you say, "Officer, I'm going to remain silent and wait for you to complete the stop. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm exercising my constitutional rights." When they rapid-fire questions at you, you say, "Officer, I mean no disrespect, but I've been advised by my attorney not to answer questions during traffic stops. I'm happy to provide my license, registration, and insurance. Beyond that, I'm invoking my right to remain silent." When they ask to search your vehicle in any form, you say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches of my person, my property, or this vehicle." When they use the guilt trip or the easy way versus hard way threat, you say, "Officer, I genuinely appreciate that. I'm not trying to cause any problems. But on the advice of my attorney, I don't answer questions during traffic stops. I've provided my documents. Am I free to go?" When they make a false legal claim that you are required to answer, you say, "Officer, with respect, I don't believe I'm legally required to answer those questions. and I'm going to continue to exercise my right to remain silent. If you believe you have legal grounds to detain me, I'd ask that you cite the specific law. Otherwise, am I free to go? When they threaten a warrant, you say, "Officer, I do not consent to a search. If you feel you have the legal grounds to obtain a warrant, I am prepared to wait for the court's decision." When they claim to smell something to justify a search, you say, "Officer, there is nothing illegal in this car. I do not consent to a search, but I will not physically resist. I am noting for the record that I do not consent." When the stop appears to end, but they try one more question, you say, "Thank you, officer. I'm going to head out now and continue to exercise my right not to answer further questions. Have a good night." Then you get in your car and you leave. If they search anyway despite your denial, you say, "Officer, I am not physically resisting, but I want the camera to see that I have explicitly denied consent for this search. You are proceeding over my legal objection, and I am preserving my right to challenge this in court." These phrases are your constitutional firewall. They close every legal door that a trick question is designed to open. They eliminate every ambiguity a police report can exploit. And they do all of it without confrontation, without hostility, and without giving a single officer a legitimate reason to escalate. The Constitution does not jump out of your glove box and stop someone from violating your rights. You are the only one who can activate your rights in that moment by using your voice precisely and deliberately. Law enforcement is trained to use your politeness, your fear, your silence, your relief, and your decency against you, but they are not trained to deal with a citizen who knows the exact phrases to shut down each trap before it closes. You are not being difficult when you use these words. You are not being paranoid or uncooperative. You are being a constitutionally protected citizen who understands what they are entitled to. And that is not only your right, it is your responsibility to yourself. We just covered 6 of the most dangerous trap questions used during traffic stops and the exact words to neutralize every single one. But knowing these words is only half of this. The other half is knowing what happens after the stop is over, what your rights are during station questioning, what to do if you are arrested, and the specific mistakes people make in the 24 hours following a traffic stop that quietly destroy their case before it ever reaches a courtroom. Because the traffic stop itself is often not the most dangerous part. What comes after is